right, so there are a few key parts of the brain. The ones we talk about most in this class are these bad boys, the amygdala and the frontal cortex. You'll hear me call it the prefrontal cortex. They're pretty much the same thing, but the prefrontal cortex is like the very front of it. So the amygdala is probably, I'd say even at you guys' age, I'm not guessing what your ages are or anything, but I'm just saying based on if you are a teenager or 18, 19, 20, if you're less than 25 even, the amygdala is very active, and this part is still developing. This part helps with making decisions. So the prefrontal cortex helps you make logical decisions, to think through things based on past experiences. So if you have a lot of experiences that you've learned from in your younger years, your prefrontal cortex could be more developed than someone who's 23 years old. And if you're like 17, yours could be more developed. Not everybody's develops at the same rate. So our experiences definitely help to develop that. The more we use logical and sound reasoning, the faster it develops. The amygdala is a very active part of the brain that is all about like survival skills. So there's something called fight, flight, or freeze. So if I'm like defending myself because someone were to try to attack me, that's called the fight response, which is part of that fight, flight, or freeze. The other one would be, let's say I'm about to cross the street out there and someone waves me on and I think I'm clear to pass. And a car is like just raging on down the road about to hit me and I freeze up. That's the freeze response. So it's keeping, that part of the brain is keeping me safe. It's stopping me from crossing, even though I think I'm okay. The last one would be to flee or to run away. So like hypothetically, if someone broke into my house or something and I was able to escape quickly, that would be the flee response. So these all keep us safe away from real life threats. We're going to talk about the amygdala a lot in this class, because if you struggle with anxiety or just stress in general, and you're always stressed out, that can be an overactive amygdala. I've definitely been there. I feel like some days more than others, stress just accumulates, or I find myself being more anxious than other days. And I do struggle with anxiety, so the amygdala part being overactive kind of makes sense. So yes, like doctors prescribe a variety of drugs or pharmaceuticals that can help with things like that. But in this class, I'm no doctor, so I focus on teaching you like coping and breathing skills and stuff like that that can help with stress. If the amygdala is overactive, it can be really dangerous if the body's always in fight, flight, or freeze mode. And it's not particularly fun to stress about things that are just normal everyday things for the person who has anxiety or stress. So we'll talk about how to manage that. The two other parts that you don't really have to know as much about, but they're good to know, is the hippocampus and the hypothalamus. So this one is responsible for organization of memories. So that's important. We like our memories and to be able to reflect upon them. Our memories also teach us things. So it helps us remember like sensations or emotions that we've had from certain experiences. Like if I touch a hot stove top, right away my amygdala would go off and be like, "Ooh, that's hot!" Like, and back away, and it keeps me safe so I don't burn myself. I'll probably get a little bit of a burn, but it makes me remove my hand. But this part of the brain helps to make sure I don't do that again, or I check to make sure, like, oh, is everything cooled down before I clean the stove? So that part's really important for our memories. This part up here is responsible for helping us like anything internal stability. So it helps regulate thirst and hunger. So if you maybe like aren't eating enough or overeating, you might not be listening to that part of the brain. So it tells us our basic needs. So that's kind of nice. And it also can control anger. I always forget this part, but responses to pain or pleasure as well. So that's very important. So these are kind of the key parts. One of your assignments today asks you to talk about what they're responsible for or what they do. So just kind of put it in your own words. Someone in my first class said, well, if I split the screen, I can just kind of like copy this and paste it there. And I'm like, yeah, you could, but I want you to practice putting in your own words so that you can describe what these parts of the brain do. When we understand our brain better, we can be more aware of our decision making. We can be aware if we're in fight, flight, or freeze. We can just kind of understand what's up better with ourselves. So that's what I would prefer. For the prefrontal cortex, this is really good if you're setting goals for yourself and trying to achieve them. It helps if you have to adapt. We've had to make a lot of changes this year, right? I mean, some of you guys might have gone to school online part of the year. We have these masks we have to wear. We probably wash our hands more often. So prefrontal cortex helps us remember to follow logical reasoning and whatnot. It also helps us make decisions, which can be tricky because when you're in your teens or even your early 20s, that part's not developed yet. They say female prefrontal cortex develops a little bit quicker and male a little bit later in general, not always. So that's something to keep in mind too, as you know, if you're dating someone, you're like, why are they making those decisions? I mean, they don't blame your prefrontal cortex for everything. Like, oh, bad decision, my prefrontal cortex isn't developed yet. That's probably not the way to go. But yeah, it does develop as we age. So it may not be 100% developed. A lot of people, if they, what was I going to say? If they have some negative things happen in their life when they're younger, that can affect the development of the prefrontal cortex. But it actually, our brain is very changeable, like plastic or moldable. And even if we've had some bad experiences or things happen to us, we can rewire the brain, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, so the amygdala is the part that perceives threats and says, hey, we gotta run, we gotta fight, or we gotta freeze. So it secretes hormones or releases them into the rest of the body. So we'll dive deeper tomorrow into what those hormones are. But it sends like hormones to our muscles and which is good, and excess blood that prepares us to fight, flight, or freeze. If you have an overactive amygdala, that just means you might stress out about things that aren't real threats, which happens sometimes. People who have like a real thing like PTSD might actually react to something that reminds them of their past. So that could also result in an overactive amygdala. Now, if you have an overactive amygdala, it can still be changed. So it's called neuroplasticity, which just means like the brain is like plastic, and we can rewire our reactions. So in this class, we'll talk a lot about what we can do in the moment before we react to something, especially if we're always in fight, flight, or freeze, and it's affecting our lives. So if you have an overactive amygdala, obviously we'll go into this deeper throughout the course, but realizing that you have been triggered by something is really important. We call that metacognition. So taking a moment to say, why is this bothering me? And it doesn't bother like anybody else in the room, or why is this causing me to react this way? Giving yourself some like patience, like, oh yeah, that happened in my life and this is coming back up. Be aware if you're judging yourself or you're judging the situation. That way you can form a clear perception. Noticing where the tension is in our body, like a lot of people carry their tension in their shoulders like this, or if you get low back pain, like that happens to me sometimes, it could be carrying stress there. So just being aware of that. Sometimes it's just correcting our posture. Other times it's, hey, like I need to physically remind myself to relax. So excess stress can definitely accumulate in our body. And just remember that you don't need the approval of others. If you can react in the way that you want other people to see you. You can react in a way that represents your values. I think that's the most important thing about training your amygdala. What happened here? Oh, I thought someone had a question, sorry. So there's this little video that explains emotions in the brain. I'll go ahead and play it for us. And then if online you guys can't hear videos I play in class, what you can do is you can turn, could you actually do that? I was gonna say, you can watch a video afterwards and just watch it on your laptop after I go through the slides. Or watch it on a device and mute me on another device. See if my sound behaves today.
When we hear the word emotion, most of us think of love, hate, happiness, or fear. Those strong feelings we experience throughout life. Our emotions are the driving force behind many of our feelings, helpful and unhelpful. Just regular emotions are. Our brains wires for threats or rewards. If one is detected, the feeling that you have the brain alerts us to release messages. Emotions are the event that these chemical messages travel through our brain. When our brain receives a message of threat, our brain releases the stress hormones adrenaline and cortisol, which prepare us for fight or flight response.
He's dancing and fighting at the same time.
Our brain releases dopamine, oxytocin, or serotonin. These chemicals to report and motivate us to continue our task toward food. These help image that we're interested in sometimes reactions that are human are so strong that it dominates the behaviors, and we're unable to think rationally in the moment. Our issues measure our hurt. While many of our emotional responses are unconscious, our thinking increases our emotions and sometimes even harm. Just thinking about something different can trigger an emotional response. This is where we can manage our emotions with conscious thinking. Our emotions play a powerful role in the way we experience the world. Understanding and regulating our emotions through our thoughts and behaviors can help us take greater control of our brain and achieve our goals.
That's just a little video that explains essentially our feeling part of the brain, our amygdala can take over. And then we know we don't use our prefrontal cortex all the time. So like I was watching a show last night and the guy got really upset and really angry. And I'm pretty sure he knew it wasn't right because his kid was right there. Someone said something to his kid. And instead of like going and having a mature conversation with the adult, that what he said was pretty racist about his kid, he took this baseball bat he had and pretty much like broke the guy's car, like in his lights. And, you know, you could feel, he's such a good actor, you could feel the emotion. But afterwards, his kid was scared. His kid didn't understand. And now his kid thinks that's, you know, okay. And instead of kind of thinking through how can I reach this neighbor and help them to understand that what they said was not okay. Versus now his kid's scared and he's getting in trouble and he's not around for his kid right now. So really good show, by the way. I don't know if you guys watch Million Little Things, but it was a good episode. You could definitely feel the anger. And you could see that his brain and his emotions took over the rest of his logical reasoning. So a lot of us have different kind of stressors. So here's just some examples of stress. It could be maybe school's been a stressor for you in the past, money, family issues, being pulled in too many directions with your time. If you work and go to school, it's a lot. Some people might have kids. That's another responsibility and potential stress. So for today, what I'm going to ask you guys to do is there is a Google form, a teacher pay teacher or easel activity. They must have changed the name of teachers pay teacher to easel. I didn't realize that. And there's a journal. It doesn't matter to me what order you do them in. This parts of the brain Google form, I just ask if you're looking at the PowerPoint, try to put it in your own words. So that way you can explain what the parts of the brain do. So you're gonna differentiate, prefrontal cortex from the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the hypothalamus. If you need more information on any of those parts of the brain, you have to look it up as well. You can do that. You're going to talk about what do I do if I have an overactive amygdala, and what are some stressors in my life. I'm the only one who reads this. It's confidential, so you can feel free to be as honest as you would like on there. Acknowledging our stressors is the first step to then channeling or choosing our reaction to them. This EASL activity does say the teenage brain. I know some of you might be like early 20s. It's still helpful. I've found it helpful, and I'm long left those years. I still find it helpful. So if you do this activity, you'll have to put I think you have to hit join with Google and type your name in there. And it is just a little thing you read through, and then there's some questions on the second page, but you have to hit the little arrow to get to the second page. What I noticed earlier is it won't let you type in there unless you hit the text box. So I'll come around and make sure everyone knows how to do that. The journal is pretty much about reflecting on how you think this class is already day 2, having an overview, how you think it might help you in your other classes. So how you think it might help you accomplish your goals, knowing that we're going to be studying the parts of the brain. And maybe there's something that it's going to help you with outside of class. Like, hey, I struggle with anger management, or hey, I struggle with anxiety, and I'm looking forward to getting some tools for that. That way I know what you're kind of looking for from the class. It's just as much your class as it is mine. So as long as I can hit the standards, if there's other activities you want to bring into the classroom, things you think that would help, I'm all about that. And yeah, just if you have questions, I guess just let me know. Did someone online unmute themselves to ask about something? Maybe.